This is going to be the first video in a series that I'm going to do on playstyles for D&D 5e. Now, what do I mean by playstyles? A playstyle is a term I've used several times here on the channel, and it's a summary or a quick classification, you might say, of how that character performs in the game. So a playstyle is defined by three things. Number one, you have their zone, where they're going to be in combat in relation to the enemy. Number two, you have their role, what kinds of features and abilities they're going to unleash in combat and what that actually means for the enemies or their allies. And then three, you have their dynamic. And their dynamic explains how that character performs out of combat in the interaction and exploration pillars of play. In this video, we're just talking about zones in combat, what it means whenever I say a frontline, midline, and backline character. So what defines a frontline character in D&D 5e is, usually they have a hit die of at least a d8, preferably a d10, ideally a d12. Looking at the d12, all we really have is Barbarian. d10 we have Fighter, Ranger, and Paladin. And then for d8 we have Artificer, Cleric, Monk, Bard, Druid, and Rogue. And Warlock, you dum-dum. Now, if it's going to be a character that has that d8 hit die, they really need to have heavy armor proficiency with a shield, or some kind of an unarmored defense feature. This way, they're not really scared of getting in there, possibly being subjected to attack rolls, taking a little bit more damage than the people that are going to be behind them in combat. These are going to be character archetypes that not only can they take a hit, but they've got the tools to prevent really suffering from the effects of damage. Now, martial weapon proficiency is also very much preferred, so that way they have the strength-based high damage dealing weapons available. But if you're looking at something like Cleric or College of Swords Bard, those are classes that they have spells available to them to where, yes, even though they have those proficiencies, they can bolster up those weapons or cast spells that are just as effective as those heavy martial weapons. And then the last thing that defines this frontline playstyle is going to be features that reward frontline style play. If you look at Barbarian, the most ideal, I think, the pinnacle of what it means to be a frontline character in D&D, they have their Rage feature. And Rage is a feature that rewards you getting in there, making the martial weapon attacks, using strength for all of your check. Like, Rage is the perfect frontline feature. Frontline characters are trying to stay within 5 feet of the enemy. That way they're able to get in there and make their attacks. If you have reach, this might extend to maybe 10 feet. Some other features might allow you to go a little bit further. Like if you look at maybe a bugbear build of some kind, that can allow you to possibly be a 15-foot like frontline character. But for the most part, a frontline character is trying to always stay within 5 feet of the enemy. Now, midline characters, these are going to be characters that are going to be most at home within 30 feet of the enemy. Usually they have a d8 hit die. Sometimes you might see some ranged d10ers try to make it into this like zone of play. And then you can even see some d6 classes possibly start to creep forward. Look at like Bladesinger Wizard. You look at possibly some like maybe Divine Soul Sorcerer builds or Draconic Ancestry Sorcerer builds. As far as armor for midliners goes, ideally you want to get at least light armor, so that way you don't necessarily have to have, the AC 17 above, whatever, but it really helps in those cases that you might be subjected to attacks to at least have like a 15 or 14. And as far as weapon proficiencies go, simple weapons will really do here. Midliners are mostly going to be focused on their other class features that help out that playstyle. Usually for midliners, what really helps is going to be some form of spell casting. Usually every single midliner, with the exception of Rogue or Monk, has a spell casting feature. I think the class that most defines what it means to be a midliner is probably Cleric, and Cleric has defined what it meant to be a midliner since the very first edition of the game. If we look at that original, like, classic party composition of Fighter, Rogue, Cleric, and Wizard, the Cleric is the one that's most comfortable being in the middle, because not only do they have a little bit better defenses than the Wizard, but they're trying to stay in the middle, like in between all the members of the party, so that way they can access them for all of their healing magic, do any of their buffs, whatever it is that they're going to do. And midliners can be pushed towards the front or towards the back, depending on what their subclass gives them. As far as their features go, they like features that usually help out either ranged combat or allow them to pop in and pop out, like in the case of Monk getting Step of the Wind. You look at Rogue being able to disengage as a bonus action, that way you can stay in the midline, pop in to do your damage, and then pop out pretty easily. But if you look at a class like Cleric, where, you know, you look at Forge Domain, Forge Domain gets pushed up into the front line. And I think what's interesting about a lot of the midliners is that you can build an entire party around midline, like one of these classes, and actually make a pretty effective party composition. You know, a party of all clerics is actually going to do fairly well. A party of all bards is going to do pretty well. Like, you can build up like College of Swords for your frontliner, College of Valor for your frontliner, whatever. You want to go backline, go College of Lore to be able to snag some wizard spells or sorcerer spells, whatever. These are all really flexible classes that can pop in and out of the different zones fairly easily. Now, backline, this is going to be preferably at least 30, if not like 60 feet away from the enemy. This is where we're going to find all of our squishier glass cannon characters, such as Wizard, Sorcerer, and probably some of our range characters that are investing more into Dex than into Constitution. Your Archer Rogues, your Evocation Wizards, your big blasty Wild Mage Sorcerers, those are all going to be more comfortable as far away from the enemy as possible. If your character's hit die is a d6, most often this is going to be where you're going to try and remain in combat. You want to stay away from the enemy because those hit points to you are super precious. But if you're a d8 or a d10 character making ranged weapon attacks, this is also going to be an area where you're going to stay. And I'll even go as far as to say if your class doesn't give you any armor proficiencies or any sort of unarmored defense feature in the class, then you need to be sure that you are staying as far in the backline as possible. And just like with midline, we might see some archetypes that allow some of these classes to get a little bit closer to the front line. If we're looking at Abjuration Wizard or Blade Singer, possibly Draconic Ancestry Sorcerer, these are different archetypes that may be able to be pushed up a little bit further and still be pretty effective, but I don't really know that too many of them are getting a lot of benefits out of that. Possibly Abjuration Wizard. I know with Blade Singer, you're trying to get in and make those, like, you know, weapon attacks. But if that's not what you're trying to do, if you don't have any class features that are rewarding you for getting up there in the front line, the best thing for you to do is just stay back and keep blasting. You know, all these different play styles, no matter what your position is, we all have these different responsibilities as these characters in the game. So if you're a frontliner, usually your responsibility, you could say, is that you're supposed to be the one trying to aggro the enemies and take damage for the people that are behind you. You are the big shield. As a midliner, there's two positions here. I think we could call the support and the harasser, where the harasser, if we're looking at like rogue or monk, their job is to get in, deal damage, pop back out. Or if you look at cleric or artificer or bard, your job is going to be to help your allies do whatever it is they're trying to do. You are support. And then your responsibility as a backliner is to deal damage and stay out of trouble. If you can stay hidden, that's amazing. Do that. But like, you as a backliner, the entire party is counting on you to deal as much damage as you possibly can, because they know that you don't have a lot of hit points, so they're there taking the damage for you. So I hope that explains zoning to you guys in D&D. Let me know in the comments below if you want me to explain anything a little bit further. In the next video, we're going to be talking about roles, what your features and abilities say about you as a combatant. If you're new to my channel, I do a lot of D&D content, usually some homebrew reviews or subclass reviews, just trying to talk about this game a little bit. So if that sounds like something that would interest you, go check out some of my other videos and subscribe if you haven't already. I want to give a shout out to my Patreon sponsors for helping me keep the lights on around here. You guys are absolute heroes. Thank you all so much for your sponsorship. I thank you all so much for being here. I hope you all are staying safe, staying healthy, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.